Hare Krishna. Amakyana Timrandasya Chanansla Slakya Sexual Metam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Sarvasastra Bipiyusha Sarva Vadeke Satphala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Dikpada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalit Panto Tita Titya Sri Krishna Parivaktita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all the Vedic scriptures, O prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you were enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical knowledge, of all spiritual philosophical conclusions. O you who grant spiritual vision to the people of the world, O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees. O Lord, you are the sun that has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned among us. Paramananda Padaya Prema Vasyakshayate Sarvata Sevayaya Shri Krishnaya Namostute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance unto you by reading you. One attains transcendental bliss for your syllables and pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are an incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madeka Bandha Mat Sangin Mat Guru Man Manabadana Mantis Nishtaka Mat Bhagya Mat Ananda Namostute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, offer respectful obeisance unto you. O sadhu sadhu tadain atinichotsataraka, anamunskadachi mam premarit kantayos pura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O giver of the saintliness to the unsaintly, the uplifter of the very fallen, please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest upon my heart and my throat, accompanied by pure love of Krishna. Today we continue with the second chapter, but before we discuss the last verse of this chapter, so I want to hear from you. The Hiranyakashipu is preaching to his nephews, and the purpose is that to help them to get out of lamentation. And he gives various reasons why they should not lament. So my question to you is, do you remember any of the points he made that would help his relatives to stop lamenting? That whatever you remember, please raise your hand if you want to make one point. Just make one point you remember. That so, Pavitra Prabhu, yes, please speak. You have to unmute. Someone else remember something? Yes, Pavitra.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Yeah, he was saying that it's not like travelers meet in a restaurant.
Yes.
They will go to be in the restaurant after everybody's taking his food, and everybody go back to his own destination.
Right, that was one of the points, like travelers on a train you meet for some time, and then after the travel, you don't see them ever again in your life. And that's the reality in this world. We come together for some time and then we leave. That is very temporary. Someone else remember something Hiranyakasipu said to console his relatives?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yes, Rabinapu. Yes, please speak.
Yeah, Maharaj, a hero's death in front of his enemy is glorious and desirable.
Okay, a hero's death is glorious. So it is in the scriptures, when the Kshatriya dies on the battlefield, he goes to the heavenly planet. So it's glorious. Yes. Someone else remember some point? That there were a few more. Maybe we should
Yes,
over.
Maharaj,
Yes, please.
He's preaching like the living entity has no death and he's eternal, inexhaustible. So in that way, he's preaching the philosophy of soul, which is eternal, and the body is temporary.
Okay.
And ultimately, we have to leave the body.
Yeah, basic preaching. Yes, we are not a body. And the body does not take birth, does not die, and so on. So while lamenting for what is between, Mother Prabhupada Priya, please.
He tells that story about the king who dies on the battlefield. Is this going too far ahead, or?
Yeah, no. He tells the story of Yamaraj.
And the queen's lamenting, and Yamaraj comes to talk to them. And one of the arguments he gives is that even if somebody, how did he put it? That even if a person has no protector, like he's a small boy, taking the form of a small boy, he says that even if he's motherless, fatherless, but if he's protected by the Lord, then he won't die. Whereas even if someone's living safely at home with a loving mother and father, he can die. Or in the same way, even if someone is an expert physician, the patient dies, whereas someone who gets no medical treatment can recover. Yes. So basically, life and death are in the hands of the Lord, and there's nothing really we can do about it. And so we should just accept the supremacy of the Lord and be happy with whatever providence ordains for us.
Yeah, thank you. That's Mother Kasturica shares also a point. She says, the mind is agitated by the modes of material nature, living entities changing body due to subtle and gross bodies. He's thinking he's changed from one position to another, but in reality, it is always free. So thank you. I think we covered most of the points. I bring them on the screen here. A hero's death in front of an enemy is glorious. Living entities joined together in a family, but as a result of their own actions, they are led apart to different destinations. Family members are like straws mixed together in whirlpools and later dispersed again by the same waves. They float alone in the water. I think the spirit soul has no depth, for it's eternal and inexhaustible. Being free from all material contamination, it can go anywhere in the material and spiritual worlds. The soul is different from the material body. And being misled by the slight independence, the living entity is infected by the modes of nature and is born in different families and species of life. Karnam Gunasangosya Satjon Mijan Masu. This is from Prabhupada's purport. But that, yes, by the agitation of the mind, by the material modes, the living entity thinks that he has changed from one condition to another. Avikalapumam, the Atma, the spirit soul, is always unchanged. And then Manodharma, that's also from the purport of Srila Prabhupada, the spirit soul carried away by mental activities suffers so-called conditions of material life. Bewildered, the living entity accepts the body and the mind to be the self, considers some people as kinsmen and others be outsiders, and thus he suffers happiness and distress, birth, death, lamentation, foolishness, and anxiety, or they are all due to material considerations. The conditioned soul comes from an unknown place and returns after death to that same unknown place, which is controlled by material nature. Knowing this, why do they usually lament? So Hiranyakashipu, he has this knowledge of the soul that, but he uses this Vedic knowledge, for his own purpose. He just wants his family members to be pacified. That, so now we continue with the next section, which we are already discussed up to text 42, now text 43. As fire, although situated in wood, is perceived to be different from the wood, the air, although situated within the mouth and nostrils, is perceived to be separate, and as the sky, although all-pervading, never mixes with anything, so the living entity, although now engaged within the material body, of which is a source, of which it is the source, is separate from it. That so this hereafter, the Hiranyakashipu or Yamaraj will give another example. That so mainly this verse 43 says we are different from the body. The body is made of earth, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. They are bina prakriti, separate energy, material energy. That, but the soul belongs to the higher spiritual energy. That is separate from the living being, these material elements. That so now text 44. Here we have Yamaraj speaking again. That of course in the previous verse Hiranyakashipu gives this knowledge, but it does not give the complete understanding of the soul. Complete understanding of the soul is that it is in relationship with Krishna. That and that will differ from the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj. That Prahlad Maharaj will stress this relationship of the soul with Krishna. He will tell us we appear to be separate from Krishna, but the soul is actually related to Krishna. That and therefore, under all circumstances, we should depend on Krishna. This we will hear later from Prahlad Maharaj. Text 44. That here Yamaraj will call all this lamenting queens who are lamenting for their husbands Sujahya, that who has gone now, that he will call them mudas, fools. That he says, Yamaraj continued, O lamenters, you are all fools. The person named Sujahya, from whom you lament, is still lying before you and has not gone anywhere. Then what is the cause of your lamentation? Previously, he heard and replied to you, but now, not finding him, you are lamenting. This is contradictory behavior, for you have never actually seen the person within the body who heard you and replied. There is no need for lamentation, for the body you have always seen is lying here. So before Yamaraj had said, he appeared before the queens as a young boy and said, this is strange, he said, that I'm much younger than you. You in your life, you must have seen many people taking birth and dying. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, for one who takes birth, death is sure. That's the most sure thing we know that will happen in our life. The body will die. But still they forget that most sure thing. That is illusion. So, and the other point it's making is you have never actually seen the person. You were always relating to the body, but the person is the soul. You never saw the person or considered the person. I remember when, this is 35 years ago, I was the head of the administration of a geriatric department in a hospital. And in the geriatric department, there were like 180 old people. Most people were in their 80s, 90 years old. And every week, two of them would die. And I would print the last invoice, body bag, everything was there, cost mortuarium. Interesting. But I've seen there many people dying. Once an old man was dying, and I could see in his eyes the lights went out in his eyes. You can see in the eyes the soul, the living force. But then when the soul is leaving, it becomes the light. It's like the light goes out, and the last breath comes out of his mouth. And the daughter was there, lamenting, "He has gone, he has gone." But she says he is gone, but the body is still there. Does she understand that he is not a body? Usually not. They say like that, but they don't really understand. But it means they have actually never seen the person. They have always seen the body. It's such a deep illusion that. So now, yes, I read the last part of the purport. After death, when the breath within the nostrils has stopped, one can understand that the person within the body who was hearing and replying is now gone. Therefore, in effect, the common man concludes that actually the spirit soul was different from the body and has now gone away. Thus, even a common man coming to his senses can know that the real person who was within the body and was hearing and replying was never seen. For that which was never seen, what is the need of lamenting? So dit is Muda. One cannot understand what is what, who is the person. That text 45. In the body, the most important substance is the life air, but that also is neither the listener nor the speaker. Beyond even the life air, the soul also can do nothing. For the soul is actually the director, in cooperation with the individual soul. The supersoul conducting the activities of the body is different from the living force. So the soul, it is here the word cooperator is used. The soul is actually the director in cooperation with the individual soul. In the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, so Srila Prabhupada calls the spirit soul the cooperator. We are meant to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, to act for His pleasure, to be in harmony with the Lord, cooperate with Krishna's instructions, which are the instructions also from the super soul within, following the dictations of the super soul. Then we are cooperating. That's yes. But we think ourselves the doer. But that's not a fact. Every moment we are depending on the super soul. So only when you make friends with the super soul can we be peaceful. Hiranyakashipu, and that's the Asura above, he not only neglected the super soul, he wanted to kill the super soul. Now, I read the last part of the purport somewhere from in the middle. Although the individual soul possesses the indriyas or senses, is not actually the proprietor. Proprietor means owner, is not the owner. For the proprietor is the super soul. Consequently, the super soul is called Rishikesh, one who controls the senses, who direct the senses of the living entity. And the individual soul is advised by the directions of the super soul to surrender to him and thus be happy. Sarvadharmam parichaya mamekam saranam vraja. Thus he can become immortal and be transferred to the spiritual kingdom, where he will achieve the highest success of eternal blissful life of knowledge. In conclusion, the individual soul is different from the body, senses, living force, and the airs within the body. And above him is the super soul, who gives him the soul facilities. The individual soul who renders everything to the super soul is very happily within the body. That's in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That one who controls it, Saknoti Vyasa to him. It is first at the end of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So text 46. The 5 material elements, the 10 senses and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entity comes in contact with material bodies whether high or low, and later gives them up by personal prowess. The strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different types of bodies. So one body after another. That one body after another, trying to get the things we did not achieve in this life. That we desire to fulfill material desires, we get material bodies. But what is intrinsic, what is really a characteristic of a material desire? That what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita of material desires? That Duspranana Lenachai said that, yeah, these desires burn like fire. They burn like fire, and they can never be fulfilled. Yeah. This is in the Bhagavad Gita. Jnanena Vitam. Yeah. This is the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I just need the first word of the Sanskrit. Yeah, Avitam Jnana Etena, Jnana Nityavarana Kamrupena Counter Duspranana Lenacha. That the living entities, pure consciousness becomes covered by its eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. That so they are never satisfied in these material desires, and at the end of life they remain unfulfilled. If one has, they did a survey with multi-million billionaires and what their desires were. And they want more and more. They think they are insecure with only a few $1 billion. They want more and more, never satisfied. That so by that you die, and these unsatisfied desires are still there. And next life you try again to fulfill them, and it never goes. That because we are not hearing the directions of the super soul within. And that's our free will. We have the free will to follow our desires or to follow Krishna's instructions. That's free will. And that's the only free will we have. If we follow Krishna's instructions, we will become free from the influence of material nature. So by that we get one body after another. And what's the result of trying to fulfill these desires? Bhagavad Gita 5:22. Ye samsvasya bhoga dukkayana evate atyantapantakantya nateshu ramate Buddha. That you want to enjoy, the reaction will be suffering. We are suffering. People who say life is for enjoyment of the senses, it's for enjoyment. But enjoyment means suffering. They are actually saying life is for suffering. Hare Krishna. So human life is not meant for this, Yamaraj says here. We must desire to go back to Godhead. So now text 4. I'll read the last paragraph of the purport. The human form of body is valuable. One can use this body to go to the higher planetary systems, to Pitri-loka, or he can remain in his lower planetary system. But if one tries, he can also return home, back to Godhead. The prowess is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Super Soul. Therefore, the Lord says, Mata Smriti Jnanam Apamsam. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. If one wants to receive real knowledge from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can become free from bondage to repeated acceptance of material bodies. If one takes to devotional service of the Lord and surrenders unto him, the Lord is prepared to give one directions by which to return home back to Godhead. But if one foolishly wants to keep himself in darkness, he can continue in a material existence. But now in the next verse, Yamaraj will speak about the subtle body. That as long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, is bound to the results of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals continual after life. I read a few sentences in the middle of this purport. The duty of all human beings is therefore to keep the mind always engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord. Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindayo. This is the verses that describe Ambarish Maharaj, how he uses all his senses in the service of the Lord. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Krishna, the intelligence is purified, and then the intelligence gets inspiration from the super soul, the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam. So we have to purify our intelligence. Bhagavad Gita 4.10 Vittaraga Bhayakota Manmaya Mama Pashita Bhaupokana Tapasa Puttamat Bhavan Agataha. Many great sages in the past have become free from attachment, fear, and anger. And they became purified by knowledge of me. They became purified by knowledge. And then being purified, then they engage in my devotional service and develop love for me, Krishna says. That so purifying our intelligence by hearing about Krishna and by performing devotional service. Tesham satyuktam bachadam pitavukam dadami buddhiyogtam yenam apayantiti. Krishna gives intelligence to the heart when we serve him with a little love. He gives us this Buddhi Yoga. And this Buddhi Yoga is the Super Soul giving us intelligence. So the mind should be engaged in Smaranam, thinking always of Krishna, always. Kirtanya Sada Ari, always. And in the next verse, there Yamaraj speaks about happiness and distress, meaningless. It's meaningless in this world. That's here his words from text 48. It is fruitless to see and talk of the material modes of nature and the resultant so-called happiness and distress as if they were factual. When the mind wanders during the day and a man begins to think himself extremely important, or when he dreams at night and sees a beautiful woman enjoying with him, these are merely false dreams. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. But it's difficult to educate a person who is engaged in lamentation, who is so attached to things. They can't hear anything. That we had seen that that when the Pandavas were in trouble, and because the Kurus wanted, Duryodhana and all his brothers wanted to usurp the legal heritage of the Pandavas. When Krishna heard this, he sent Akrura to Hastinapur to speak with Dhritarashtra but Dhritarashtra, he heard the words of Akrura. Akrura gave him good advice. Please give them back what it is their right on the heritage. Don't create a war here. And Dhritarashtra said to Akrura, your advice is very good. It's like hearing the nectar of the gods. But unfortunately, due to attachment to my sons, that it cannot stay in my heart, that advice. It goes to my heart like a lightning. That's the point. When it's too material engrossed, one can just not concentrate on this knowledge. The mind goes always to this good and bad and these attachments that to the profit in our lives. It goes towards that. And so it's difficult to educate such a person. They can't hear anything. Like when Narada Muni, we will see later, he will take Hiranyakashipu's wife to his ashram because Hiranyakashipu, as we will see in the next chapter, will do austerities for a very long time. And at the ashram, Narada Muni is instructing Kayadu in the Bhagavatam. But she could not concentrate on hearing. Her heart was with her husband. She wanted to go back, that's all. But Narada blessed Prahlad in her womb, and Prahlad heard. That's interesting. So it's difficult in such a situation to discriminate reality from illusion. We can't believe our mind and what it is holding on. Our mind must become a friend first. Bandhu atmatmastasyaya natmachatmanachita anatma tu shatrutve vartitatma vusatruvat. The mind is our friend when it is controlled. But when it's controlled by this lamentation, by this good and bad, we don't hear much. We chant Hare Krishna and our mind is busy with something else. We have to bring it back. It becomes a whole fight. Yes. So the mind to touch to one thing is attached to one thing, and next moment to another thing. And then it will reject the previous thing. So Arjuna says to Krishna, Sansalam imana Krishna. This mind is chansalam, flickering, going from one point to another. So and in the purport at the end, even if by fruitive activity or worship of the demigods one is elevated to the higher planetary systems for sense enjoyment, his situation is condemned in Bhagavad Gita as antavat, perishable. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. For some time it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoctions of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and therefore have no meaning. So in the next chapter, Prahlad Maharaj will say, it will say that stop trying to become happy in this world. When you stop trying to become happy in this world, then you will become happy. Because that will not happen. The happiness of the senses, happiness and distress, it's here. It is here presented as meaningless. What it is, that one can all his life engage the senses and get sensual happiness, and the other man is suffering his whole life. What do they get at the end? The same, they die. That's the result. That's the result of the body and material life. So now text 49. Those who have full knowledge of self-realization will know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly laments. Therefore, it's difficult to educate a person in illusion, the purport. According to the Mimamsa philosophers, everything is eternal, nitya, and according to the Sankhya philosophers, everything is mithya or anitya, impermanent. Nonetheless, without real knowledge of Atma, the soul, such philosophers, must be bewildered and must continue to lament as Sudras. Srila Sukadeva Goswami said to Parikshit Maharaj, Shotavya nirajana nrinam santi sahasrasa pasyatam atma tattvam hyesu hriya medinam. Those who are materially engrossed, being blind to knowledge of the absolute truth, have many subjects for hearing in human society, O Emperor. For ordinary persons engaged in material activities, there are many subject matters to understand, because such persons do not understand self-realization. One must therefore be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances in life, he will remain steady in his vows. And now, Yamaraj will tell another story. And I will first read all the verses without purport, just to get the story. There was once a hunter who lured birds with food and captured them after spreading a net. He lived as if appointed by death, personified as the killer of the birds. While wandering in the forest, the hunter saw a pair of Kulinga birds. Of the two, the female was captivated by the hunter's lure. O queens of Sujarya, The male Kulinga bird, seeing his wife put into the greatest danger in the shape of providence, became very unhappy because of affliction. The poor bird, being unable to release her, began to lament for his wife. Alas, how merciless is providence! My wife, unable to be helped by anyone, is in such an awkward position and lamenting for me. What will providence gain by taking over this poor bird? What will be the profit? If unkind providence takes away my wife, who is half my body, why should he not take me also? What is the use of my living with half of my body, bereft by loss of my wife? What shall I gain in this way? The unfortunate baby birds, bereft of their mother, are waiting in the nest for her to feed them. They are still very small and have not yet grown their wings. How shall I be able to maintain them? Because of the loss of his wife, the Kulinga bird lamented with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, following the dictations of mature time, the hunter, who was very carefully hidden in the distance, released his arrow, which pierced the body of the Kulinga bird and killed him. Thus Yamaraj, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, "You are foolish, because you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not know that even if you lament for your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never give him back alive. In the meantime, your lives will be finished." So lamenting for others, but not seeing our own death. We are the next one to be executed. And we lament for the other one. So this is the most amazing thing in this world, which Yudhishthira Maharaj told to Yaksha, that everyone in this world tried to settle him here permanently in a world which has the basic character of its all temporary. So here, this is mentioned here in the purport of Yudhishthira Maharaj. Yamaraj once asked Maharaj Yudhishthira, "What is the most wonderful thing within this world?" Maharaj Yudhishthira replied, "Ahani ahani bhutani gachantiya yamalayam. Sesha stabramichanti kimacharyam ataparam." Hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death of every moment, but a foolish living entity nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing in this world. Everyone has to die because everyone is fully under the control of material nature, yet everyone thinks that he is independent, that whatever he likes he can do, that he will never meet death but live forever, and so on. So-called scientists are making various plans by which living entities in the future can live forever. But while they are thus pursuing such scientific knowledge, Yamaraj in due course of time will take them away from their business of so-called research. So, VIHE-Bhaktivedanta told this story of Yamaraj to his relatives. And now he will speak again, that says, while Yamaraj in the form of a small boy was instructing all the relatives surrounding the dead body of Sujahya, everyone was struck with wonder by his philosophical words. They could understand that everything material is temporary, not continuing to exist. Text 59. Actually, after instructing all the foolish relatives of Sujahya, Yamaraj in the form of a boy disappeared from their vision. Then the relatives of King Sujahya performed ritualistic funeral ceremonies. Therefore, none of you should be aggrieved for the loss of the body, when your own, whether your own or those of others. Only in ignorance does one make body distinctions. That who am I? Who are the others? What is mine? What is for others? That's ignorance. So this is text 60. Yes. So this is the body concept of life. Body concept of life. Then one is centered on economic development. That dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Dharma, using religion for performing pious activities, and that can get pious results. Pious results means happiness for the body finally. That's artha, wealth, calm, fulfillment of desires, and give up all suffering. So that's the body conception, and at the other side you have the soul conception. One who understand is different. Then the goal changes. The goal is not economic development anymore. Our activities change, and the aim of our activities come to please Krishna. They are changing, and our definition of good and bad is changing. Good and bad for the body, that's useless. Good for the soul and bad for the soul. Good for the soul is following Krishna's instructions, dictations of the super soul. This is the difference between the materialist and the spiritualist. The spiritualist thinks these material people, they are mad. They are striving for temporary things. And the materialist thinks of the spiritualist, they are mad, these devotees. You live only once, enjoy your senses. So these are different, yes. Now, I read a few parts of the purport. The first part here. As long as human society is in darkness and ignorance, man will continue to make huge arrangements in the body conception of life. This is described by Prahlad Maharaj as Bharam. In the materialistic conception, modern civilization makes enormous arrangements for huge roads, houses, mills, factories. And this is man's conception of advancement of civilization. People do not know, however, that at any time they themselves may be kicked out of the scene and forced to accept bodies that have nothing to do with these enormous houses, palaces, roads, and automobiles. Therefore, when Arjuna, thinking in terms of body relationship with his kinsman, Krishna immediately chastised him, saying, Kutastvar kasmalam idam vishafe samapastitam anarya shustam. This body conception of life is befitting the un-Aryas, the non-Aryans, who are not advanced in knowledge. And an Aryan civilization is a civilization advanced in spiritual knowledge. Not merely by stamping oneself an Aryan does one become an Aryan. So keep oneself in the deepest darkness concerning spiritual knowledge, and at the same time claim to be Aryan is a non-Aryan position. In this connection, Srimad-Vacharya quotes as follows from Brahma Vaibhakti Purana. And these verses are there from Madhvacharya. And at the end, Srila Prabhupada writes, the purpose is that as long as we are in the human body, our duty is to understand the soul within the body. The body is not the self. We are different from the body, and therefore there is no question of enemies, friends, responsibilities in terms of the body conception of life, one should not be very anxious about the body's changing from childhood to youth, from boy to old age, and then apparent annihilation. Rather, one should be very seriously concerned about the soul within the body, and how to release the soul from the material clutches. The living entity within the body is never annihilated. Therefore, one should surely know that whether one has many friends or many enemies, his friends cannot help him, and his enemies cannot do him any harm. One should know that he is the spirit soul, and that the constitutional position of the soul is unaffected by the changes of the body. In all circumstances, everyone, as a spirit soul, must be a devotee of Lord Vishnu, and should not be concerned with body relationships, whether with friends or enemies. One should know that neither we ourselves or enemies in the body conception of life are ever killed. So what's the conclusion here? The conclusion is detachment from the material world. And by hearing that, this is Jnana, that this is preaching of detachment. So hearing this is good for becoming detached. The last verse of the chapter. Sri Narada Muni continued. Diti, the mother of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksi and Hiranyaksha, she heard the instructions of Hiranyakashipu along with her daughter-in-law, Usabanu, Hiranyaksha's wife. She then forgot her grief over her son's death and thus engaged her mind and attention in understanding the real philosophy of life. And this is a very significant purport at the end, the last purport. When a relative dies, one certainly becomes very much interested in philosophy, but when the funeral ceremony is over, one becomes again to materialism. Even Daityas, while materialistic persons sometimes think of philosophy, when some relative meets death, the technical term for this attitude of the materialistic persons is smasana vairagya, or detachment in a cemetery or a place of cremation. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 4 classes of men receive understanding of spiritual life and God. Artha, the distressed, Jnana, the inquisitive, Artharthi, one who desires material gains, and the Jnani, one who is searching for knowledge, especially when one is very much interested by material conditions, one becomes interested in God. Therefore, Kunti Devi said in her prayers to Krishna that she preferred distress to a happy mood of life. In the material world, one who is happy forgets Krishna or God, but sometimes if one is actually pious but in distress, he remembers Krishna. Queen Kunti Devi therefore preferred distress because it's an opportunity to remember Krishna. When Krishna was leaving Kunti Devi for his own country, Kunti Devi regretfully said that she was better off in distress because Krishna was always present, whereas now that the Pandavas were situated in their kingdom, Krishna was going away. For a devotee, distress is an opportunity to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. Not that we have to pray for distress. We are in Kali Yuga, means we have a lot of bad karma, otherwise you don't take birth in Kali Yuga. So distress will come from itself. We don't have to pray for it, but we can see it as an opportunity to remember Krishna. That there are other stories in the Bhagavatam which we heard before, like the story of Chitraketu, where his own son dies, and by the mystic power of Narada Muni, his soul enters again the body of the child, and then the soul speaks to Chitraketu and said, "Why are you lamenting?" Because Narada Muni said said to the spirit soul in the body which came that why did you leave your body? Look at your parents. How much grief you have caused to them, caused for them. And the spirit soul said, parents, which parents? I've got so many parents that I got rabbit parents, ant parents, so many parents. I got, which parents do you mean? And after hearing that, Citricate heard that, and then the soul left again the body of the child, and the body fell dead down. And Citricate came to his senses. That so another lesson we learned from these sections is that to give up the eternal for the temporary, which is flickering, changing always, it's foolish. That. But Jan Kasper is preaching here that, but now we will go to the third chapter, and he will forget all of his preaching. He will forget about it and puts his demoniac plans in practice. It's like that he said one goes to a funeral, and for some moments they see the reality, oh, it's all temporary, what's the use? But then after the funeral, they go back to their materialistic ways. I remember Krishna Chandra in Zurich, he gave the Bhakta class, and part of the Bhakta class is that they all together went to visit a crematorium, seeing our body was burnt. Quite an interesting experience. That then we get, for a few moments, we start to understand, yes, what's the use? What was the use of feeling hurt or this or that? It's all for temporary situations. It's all useless on a material plane. So these are the teachings of Hiranyakasipu. So now we will pause for 10 minutes, and then we have the more interactive part. So, but let's resume at 1:45. It's 40 minutes from now, and then we will have half an hour discussion, and we will end before will be 2:15, something. We will end half an hour. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, we will resume. So we start with a few questions. In 3940, there the subject of providence was discussed. So what is the purpose of providence? What can we learn from providence? And what is Srila Prabhupada saying we should learn from it? So someone want to comment that Yes, Rasal Prabhu, you want to speak, please?
Yes, Maharaj. Prabhupada writes in the purport of 39 that one cannot argue with the activities of Supreme Lord. He is supremely independent and free. And it's up to him that he can protect and he can annihilate. So he's not our order carrier. So our response is we should just depend on the instruction of Supreme Lord, and he's supremely free. And this is, nobody can object his supremacy. And this is what I read from the Prabhupada Maharaj.
Yeah, so that is called surrender. That so the purpose of providence is to let us understand that since everything is dependent on the free will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our only duty is to surrender unto Him and seek His protection. That so that we should always think that I have this desire and I want to do this, but it will happen only if Krishna willing. That so Krishna gives us also directions on our karma, of gives devotees situations so that they can purify them further. But then we had Yamaraj taking the form of a young boy, and he's teaching us that so that what were Yamaraj's teachings? That he's teaching us that yes, the body is only a temporary covering of the soul. There's no reason to lament for the loss of the body. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. When one is self-realized, one doesn't lament. So Yamaraj said, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses is meaningless. So why did the young boy consider meaningless both happiness and distress? Someone wants to answer this? Or Prabhupada Priya, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out how I thought it was pretty amazing that considering that Hiranyakashipu, like later he's so atheistic and he doesn't want to hear anything about, you know, the supremacy of Lord Vishnu, but it seems like in text 39 he's saying, yeah, everything is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This material world is just his plaything. We're all kind of like, you know, being moved. So it seems like he's presenting theistic arguments, although later he's, you know, totally against anything of that kind. So how is it?
Yeah, that will be clarified in the next chapter. There we will learn about his conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It takes Brahma. Brahma is the Supreme Person. That's his conception. And in addition, his intention is to please Brahma so that he can take his post and become God. We will analyze that in the next chapter. But that's interesting. Yes, it seems he's accepting the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead for him? It's not Vishnu.
He's referring to Lord Brahma here.
Well, we will see. His philosophy at the end doesn't make much sense. We will see in the next chapter.
Okay.
Yes. So, Tribhuvannath Prabhu, please speak.
Yes. Alright, I want to first of all thank you for taking time to chant this nectar. Alright, I see the theme of the young boy's teaching is centered around detachment. And from the story you picked from Bhagavatam 11 canto of the Kolendo bed, I have experience on this. One time in my village, there was a lady who lost a husband, and the family of the husband were trying to do the arrangement for the rites for the burial. The lady wrote to the court that she won't allow the burial to go to the ground. So this argument was on and on. After some time, okay, the day was getting dark. So the family said, okay, we should go to our home since she doesn't accept, she doesn't, request for the body to be buried. So when they leave, it was she and the dead body. So she began to lament. So she laments, then later on the family come back and say, okay, now we have to take the body inside. You have to be with the dead body inside. He said, no, she cannot. She cannot sleep with the dead body. So this is a big experience. Sometimes we can also relate this detachment within the devotees of Krishna. Attachment to service, not giving up service when it is not properly done. And it has so many implications when we take it around. But the underlying factor I will, say is that these attachment, is there positive attachment or negative attachment? All right?
Yes. Yes, positive and negative attachment. It's all, that's mentioned in 334 of Bhagavad Gita, that two obstacles on the spiritual path is attachment and aversion. Aversion is also attachment, but negative. That's true. And it's all useless because it's based on a false background. We think we are the body. Good point. Vasudev Krishna Prabhu, you want to say something, please?
I was going to say about this question the young boy is considering as meaningless, because Prabhupada writes in the purport that Bhagavad Gita, he's quoting that this happiness are antavat, which is like perishable. So
Yeah.
because of that, like, and he gives the example of this, like people of small intelligence, they're worshipping the demigods because they want to go to the heaven and enjoy there for some time, but then after that it has to stop. So basically it's perishable, so it is like doing some enjoyment but for some time in a dream, but the basic principle is false. So that's why this is meaningless, because they have a false background.
Yes, that's the right answer according to the purport. Thank you. So, Tribhuvanath Prabhu, you want to say something more?
No, Maharaj, my hand
Okay.
is down.
Okay, good. So now we will look at the answers. So this is from Srila Prabhupada's purport. The happiness and distress caused by the material senses. Moment, there is somewhere. I'm going to mute you. That's better, yeah. The happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. They are like the happiness and distress in a dream. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. For some time, it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoctions of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and therefore no meaning. So I've here Kasturica, Mother Kasturica is writing something. Both happiness and distress are based on whether we like or we don't like. So they depend on satisfying our mind and senses. And as mind is always changing, so the situations that happiness and distress produce are fleeting. So the boy uses the example of a man, whether awakened or sleeping, is still in a dream state to prove happiness and distress is meaning. You have understood it. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Now we have the story related of the two Kulinga birds. So the two Kulinga birds, I put a picture that these are very nice looking birds. But what's the moral of the story? What's the meaning? Can someone help me to understand that? Yes, Tribhuvanath Prabhu, yes.
Attachment is dangerous without knowledge.
Yeah, just this attachment is covering our knowledge. Avritam jnana metena jnanina nitya vairina. Right. Mother Lalita Pritimaya, you want to add something?
Yes, Maharaj. Hi, Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Maharaj, we see here Prabhupada is explaining that, the Yamadhara Maharaj is explaining that before the male bird could see that the death is coming before him, he was shot with the arrow of the hunter. So in the same way, in the material world, if we are materially attached over our parents or our spouse or our children, we lament for them, and if we do not realize that one day the death will take away us also, so there is no point in lamenting like that, in that way, because the death which has taken the person away from us, it will also come for us one day. So we have to remember that, and we have to prepare for the death.
Yeah, that's very true, and that is the philosophical explanation. That to bring that in practice, it may be a challenge for us. That because it requires really a purified heart to not be affected from it. But the more we become purified, the less affected we will become by it. Thank you. These are all important points you have made. We can look here at a summary about this, of the moral to the story. Yamaraj, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, "You are also foolish that you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not know that even if you lament for your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never get him back alive, and in the meantime your lives will be finished." From the purport, Yamaraj, one asked Yudhishthira Maharaj, "What is the most wonderful thing in this world?" Maharaj Yudhishthira replied, Ayani anani bhutani gachantiha yamailayam sesa stavramichanti kim acharyam atapara. Hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death every day, every moment, but a foolish living being nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing in this world. Hare Krishna. So we will now end the session of today a little earlier than usual, because we have a second session which starts at 4 p.m. for India, 11:30 for the UK, and more earlier for America. So I'm looking forward to see you online again at 4 p.m. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.